Have you ever wondered why some people seem to unlock wealth almost effortlessly, while others, maybe even you, work tirelessly, yet remain stuck in the same financial place? Picture this. You see a man in a simple black t-shirt, jeans, nothing extravagant. He enters a cafe quietly, sits down, and orders without fuss. To most people, he looks like anyone else. But here's the twist. This man could be worth more than you will ever earn in a lifetime. And the question that lingers in the air is not how much he has, but rather how he thinks. We grow up surrounded by messages about money. Parents tell us to study hard, get a good job, save, maybe invest a little. Society whispers that hard work will naturally bring rewards. But if that were true, wouldn't every honest worker already be wealthy? Look around. Teachers, nurses, laborers, people who give everything to their jobs. Many of them barely make ends meet. Meanwhile, others who may not work harder but think differently accumulate fortunes. Why? The uncomfortable truth is this. Millionaires don't just act differently, they think differently. And it's not about greed, luck, or even brilliance. It's about perspective. While most people think in terms of safety and comfort, the wealthy think in terms of strategy and control. Where many see risks, they see opportunities. Where many seek approval, they seek advantage. This way of thinking is not taught in schools, and rarely discussed openly, because it is brutally honest, sometimes even cold. Niccolò Machiavelli, the Renaissance thinker often misunderstood as purely cynical, once revealed that true power is never in appearances but in perception and influence. Millionaires, consciously or not, embody this principle. They understand the world as it is, not as they wish it to be. And because of that, they play a different game entirely. So let me ask you, what if the reason you've never truly advanced financially is not because you lacked intelligence, effort, or luck, but because you've been playing the wrong game all along? In this video, we are going to peel back the curtain and explore the brutal truth about how millionaires really think, and more importantly, why that mindset might be the very thing separating you from the wealth and freedom you secretly desire. Stay with me, and by the end you may not look at money or yourself the same way again. And if this already strikes a chord with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share in the comments. Do you believe mindset has been your greatest obstacle? Imagine for a moment that tomorrow morning you wake up with a completely different way of seeing the world. The same job, the same neighborhood, the same challenges, but your mind interprets every detail differently. Instead of fearing risk, you begin to see risk as possibility. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" you ask, "How can I create the means to afford this?" Subtle shift, right? And yet this change in perspective is exactly the seed from which wealth grows. Now, let's stretch the imagination further. What if every setback you've experienced, the times you failed at a project, lost money, or felt humiliated, could be reframed not as evidence of weakness, but as raw material for building resilience and strategy? That's how millionaires think. To them, obstacles are not personal tragedies, they're training grounds. While most people stop when things hurt, the wealthy interpret pain as feedback, and by doing so, they keep moving forward when others quit. Think about how different your life would be if you began to treat opportunities with this mindset. Instead of seeing the rich as lucky beneficiaries of an unfair system, imagine looking at them as living proof that playing the game with different rules produces different results. If you could adopt even a fraction of that thinking, where would you be in 5 years? 10 years? Would you still be trapped in the same exhausting cycle, or would you be operating with the clarity of someone who sees life's board game from above, not just from their single square? Here's the tension. You already know deep down that working harder isn't enough. You felt it every time your effort wasn't rewarded proportionally. That creeping frustration you carry, seeing others advance while you remain stuck, isn't laziness, isn't failure, and isn't fate. It's simply the result of approaching money with the wrong mental map. Machiavelli taught that fortune favors those who dare to seize control rather than wait for luck. This is not about ruthlessness, but about awareness. What if, starting today, you gave yourself permission to step out of the script you've been handed and instead began to imagine reality the way millionaires do? A place where control is possible and opportunities exist for those willing to see them? Pause here for a moment. Picture yourself operating from that perspective. How would your next decision look? How different would your daily routine feel if your guiding question shifted from, how do I survive, to, how do I create leverage? That difference is not small. It's the foundation of everything that separates wealth from stagnation. Here's the brutal truth. Most people will never become wealthy not because they lack intelligence, but because they cling to comforting illusions. We've been told since childhood that honesty, hard work, and patience naturally lead to financial reward. But if you dare to look around, reality tells another story. Millions of people embody these values every day and still remain financially fragile. Why? Because wealth is not the child of virtue. It is the child of strategy. This is where the millionaire mindset violently collides with popular belief. While the majority hope for fairness, the wealthy accept that life is not fair and build strategies around that truth. It may sound harsh, even cold, but let's be honest. Has wishing for fairness ever paid your bills? Has patience alone ever doubled your income? The world doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards those who understand how the game is played. Machiavelli once wrote that men should be judged by the outcomes of their actions, not by their intentions. Millionaires embody this principle unconsciously. They don't waste time debating whether the system should be fair. They focus on how to move within the system as it actually is. This distinction is what separates dreamers from achievers. The average person asks, is this right or wrong? The millionaire asks, does this work or not? Let that sink in. How many decisions in your life have been guided by the desire to be liked, to be approved, to avoid discomfort? Now compare that to the ruthless clarity of someone who thinks, what gets me closer to my goal? It doesn't mean abandoning ethics, but it does mean accepting that approval won't build your future. This is the disruptive shift. Your beliefs about money might be your greatest liability. The comforting story that hard work alone is enough has kept countless people trapped in cycles of labor and scarcity. Meanwhile, those willing to question that story, those who dare to adopt the less sentimental but more strategic approach, unlock possibilities invisible to others. So ask yourself honestly, have you been living by principles that feel noble but keep you powerless? Or are you ready to face the uncomfortable truth that wealth requires a different set of mental tools? Tools built on clarity, not illusions. Because until you break with the old story, you'll keep playing a game designed for you to lose. And the millionaires? They'll keep playing by rules you never knew existed. To truly grasp why millionaires think so differently, we need to lean on history's sharpest observers of power. Niccolo Machiavelli, often labeled as cynical, was in fact brutally realistic. In The Prince, he explained that those who understand the nature of power and act accordingly shape their destiny, while those who cling to ideals are often crushed by reality. Replace the word power with money, and suddenly his insight feels alarmingly modern. But Machiavelli isn't the only voice here. Contemporary psychology echoes the same lesson. Behavioral economists like Daniel Kahneman have shown that humans are hardwired to avoid loss more than to pursue gain. This is why most people play safe, choosing stability over opportunity. Millionaires, however, learn to override this instinct. They don't deny fear, they master it. Instead of asking, what could I lose? They reframe the question to, what could I gain if I act strategically? And literature has always hinted at this duality. Think of Shakespeare's Hamlet, paralyzed by indecision, obsessed with the morality of every choice until hesitation itself becomes his downfall. Millionaires avoid this paralysis. They understand that waiting for perfect conditions means waiting forever. As Machiavelli insisted, fortune favors the bold, the ones willing to act even in uncertainty. What does this mean for you? It means that your struggle is not a personal defect. It's a cultural script you've inherited. Society glorifies caution, obedience, and security because these values keep the machine running. But look at those who step outside the script. Entrepreneurs, investors, innovators. They are not necessarily smarter, but they dared to embrace principles others resist. Leverage, calculated risk, control of perception. Here's the paradox Machiavelli understood. Being good, in the conventional sense, doesn't guarantee survival or success. being strategic does. And that is exactly how millionaires think. They don't waste energy fighting the nature of the game. They learn its rules, then bend them in their favor. So the question becomes, whose voice are you following? The voice of tradition telling you to wait patiently, save modestly, and hope for fairness? Or the voices of those who saw the world as it is, Machiavelli, Shakespeare, modern psychology, and dared to act with clarity instead of illusion? Because once you recognize that wealth is less about labor and more about mindset, you stop blaming luck and start cultivating strategy. And that single shift can be the crack in the wall that leads to freedom. Let's pull back the curtain on the invisible forces that quietly govern your relationship with money. Because here's the truth. You don't just choose how to think about wealth. You've been conditioned. From childhood, you absorbed subtle lessons. Money is scarce. Money is dangerous. Money corrupts. Maybe you heard your parents fight about bills, or you saw neighbors envy those who had more. Slowly, without realizing, you inherited beliefs that became invisible walls around your financial potential. These walls show up in ways you barely notice. For example, when you hesitate to negotiate a salary because you don't want to seem greedy, or when you avoid investing because you fear losing what little you have, or when you secretly resent those who are wealthy, convincing yourself they must be selfish or corrupt. Each of these small reactions feels personal, but they are symptoms of a deeper cultural programming designed to keep you compliant, predictable, and safe. Now compare this to the millionaire's lens. Where you see scarcity, they see circulation, money moving like energy, meant to be multiplied. Where you see a fixed pie, they see expansion. Where you fear loss, they calculate probability. This isn't luck. It's mindset built from years of interpreting reality differently. Here's the invisible problem. Most people don't even realize they are trapped in narratives that sabotage them. They think they're making rational decisions when in fact, they're simply reenacting old scripts. Scripts written by family, culture, and even by systems that benefit when people stay afraid and passive. And because these scripts feel like common sense, questioning them feels almost unnatural. Machiavelli would call this the tyranny of appearances, the way people cling to the surface of things rather than looking at their hidden structures. Millionaires, on the other hand, are relentless about asking, what's really happening underneath? They see beyond appearances to the mechanics of power and money. That's why they make decisions others can't even imagine. So pause for a moment and reflect. Which invisible narratives are guiding your choices today? Are you saving because it's genuinely strategic, or because you're afraid of risk? Are you rejecting opportunities because they're truly unwise, or because you've been conditioned to see ambition as arrogance? The tragedy is not that most people fail. It's that they never realized they were following an invisible map drawn for someone else's benefit. The moment you expose these hidden dynamics, the game begins to change, because awareness itself is the first form of wealth. Sometimes the most powerful truths are the simplest, the ones that strike like lightning and stay with you. Let's crystallize what we've uncovered so far into sharp insights, phrases that you can carry with you like weapons in a world that resists change. Here they are. Hard work builds survival. Strategy builds wealth. Approval is a currency for the poor. Leverage is the currency of the rich. Waiting for fairness is the most expensive mistake you can make. Fear of loss keeps more people poor than actual loss ever does. Millionaires don't escape risk. They learn to profit from it. The system rewards clarity, not innocence. Comfort zones are poverty zones. You don't earn wealth. You outthink your limitations. Each of these statements cuts against the grain of what most people are taught. They're meant to unsettle, because disruption is the first step toward transformation. If they sting, that's good. It means they are scraping against old conditioning, challenging the stories you've lived by. Think about it. How many times have you stayed quiet, accepted less, or played small because you believed virtue was its own reward? Yet look at history. Look at the present. The world doesn't distribute wealth based on goodness. It distributes wealth based on perception, leverage, and decisive action. That realization may feel uncomfortable, but it's liberating once you embrace it. Machiavelli's wisdom resonates here. People who cling to appearances of goodness often end up powerless, while those who dare to act strategically shape the outcomes of nations. Translate that into your own life. If you cling to appearances of safety, decency, or modesty while others play strategically, you're not just staying the same, you're falling behind. These phrases are not slogans, they are challenges. They are meant to echo in your mind when you hesitate, when you fall back into old scripts. They demand that you ask yourself, am I choosing safety or am I choosing power? Am I acting from fear or from clarity? So take one of these statements, whichever struck you hardest, and hold it close this week. Repeat it when you feel hesitation creep in, because a single sharp insight applied consistently can begin to cut through years of conditioning. And that cut is the first opening toward freedom. One of the most unsettling truths about how millionaires think is that their world is built on paradoxes. They hold two seemingly opposite ideas in their mind without collapsing into confusion. Instead of choosing one side, they harness both. And this duality is often the secret ingredient of their wealth. Take fear, for example. The average person sees fear as a stop sign. If I feel afraid, I shouldn't move forward. But the wealthy see fear as both danger and signal. Fear tells them there's something valuable at stake. Instead of retreating, they lean in. Fear becomes not a wall, but a compass. The paradox is this: the path to security often runs straight through fear. Or consider generosity versus selfishness. Popular belief says you must choose. Either you focus on others or on yourself. But millionaires understand that serving others at scale, creating products, services, solutions, often creates immense personal wealth. In other words, selfish gain is best achieved through genuine contribution. That's why someone like Steve Jobs could obsess over design excellence, aiming to delight customers, and simultaneously accumulate one of the largest fortunes in history. There's also the paradox of time. Most people trade their hours for money, believing this is stability. But millionaires invert the equation. They use money to buy time, and then use that time to multiply money. To them, time is not a wage, it is leverage. Here lies the paradox. Those who cling to stability often end up exhausted and unstable, while those who embrace calculated instability create long-term security. Machiavelli himself warned rulers against clinging to appearances of virtue if it meant sacrificing effectiveness. He saw the paradox. To preserve the state, a prince may need to appear merciful while acting ruthlessly when necessary. Millionaires absorb this same lesson. They know how to appear cautious while taking bold risks, how to appear generous while securing advantage. It's not hypocrisy. It's strategy. So here's the reflection. What paradox have you been avoiding? Do you believe fear is a stop sign rather than a signal? Do you think generosity means self-sacrifice when it might actually mean scaling your service? Do you cling to time as something you sell instead of something you buy? The paradox is not a contradiction. It's a deeper truth. And until you learn to embrace it, you'll remain stuck in either-or thinking, while millionaires quietly live in the space of both and. That's the space where real power and real wealth begins. Now let's bring this closer to you. Because at this point you may be thinking, all of this sounds powerful, but how does it actually change my life? And here lies the promise. When you begin to think like a millionaire, the first transformation isn't in your bank account. It's in your sense of control. Most people live with a low-grade anxiety about money. It's always there, humming beneath the surface. Will the paycheck be enough? What if the car breaks down? What if the economy crashes? This constant state of fear drains energy, limits choices, and shapes identity. But when you begin to adopt the mindset we've been exploring, something radical happens. Fear shifts into focus. Instead of money controlling you, you start controlling money. And that shift feels like breathing freely for the first time. Imagine walking into a negotiation and no longer feeling intimidated because you understand the dynamics at play. Imagine looking at an opportunity and analyzing it with clarity, rather than retreating out of fear. Imagine facing a setback and asking not, why me? But, what can I learn here that gives me an edge? The reward isn't just wealth, it's confidence, freedom, and dignity. Machiavelli would argue that true power is not found in titles or possessions, but in the ability to act decisively when others hesitate. That is exactly the reward waiting for you. The courage to act where others stall, the vision to see opportunities others miss, the resilience to move through failure without being broken by it. And yes, over time, these internal shifts create external results. More opportunities appear because you're finally able to recognize them. More doors open because you carry yourself differently. Money begins to flow not because the world suddenly changes, but because your relationship with the world does. So here's the promise. If you practice thinking differently, questioning assumptions, embracing paradox, mastering fear, you will begin to experience the quiet confidence of those who are no longer trapped by invisible walls. The reward is not just financial wealth, but a life lived on your own terms. And isn't that the deepest desire? Not simply to have more money, but to live without the constant shadow of anxiety, to wake up knowing you are steering the ship instead of being tossed by the waves. That is what the millionaire mindset can give you, long before the first million ever arrives. Up to this point, we've been peeling back layers, illusions, fears, invisible dynamics. But what ties everything together is a deeper framework, one that psychology and philosophy have been mapping for centuries. The framework of perception and agency. In psychology, we call this the locus of control. Most people operate with an external locus. They believe their outcomes are dictated by luck, bosses, governments, or fate. This belief creates passivity. Millionaires, however, cultivate an internal locus of control. They act as though outcomes can be shaped by their decisions, even in uncertain conditions. This doesn't mean they control everything, it means they behave as if their choices matter, and that belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Philosophy echoes this truth. The Stoics, like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, insisted that while we cannot control the world, we can control our response to it. Machiavelli added a sharper edge. It is not enough to respond with virtue, you must respond with strategy. Wealth, then, becomes the practical outcome of combining Stoic resilience with Machiavellian realism. You endure the blows of fate without collapsing, and you shape circumstances when opportunities appear. This framework is visible in history's great builders. Entrepreneurs, artists, leaders, those who create value at scale, rarely wait for conditions to be perfect. Instead, they build within imperfection, bending the system where they can, enduring where they cannot. Their wealth is not just financial, it is existential. It comes from knowing they are agents, not victims. And here lies the unifying insight. Wealth is not primarily about money. Money is only a byproduct of agency. When you reclaim your ability to interpret reality strategically, you stop playing someone else's script. You begin to see the board clearly, noticing patterns, dynamics, and leverage points that were invisible before. Think of it like learning a new language. At first, the signs of power and opportunity are hidden, incomprehensible. But once you learn the grammar of strategy, the mindset of agency, you can suddenly read situations differently. Where others see chaos, you see structure. Where others see dead ends, you see pivots. Where others see fear, you see possibility. This is the framework beneath the millionaire's mind. It is not about greed, it is about clarity. It is not about ruthlessness, it is about realism. And once you internalize this framework, money ceases to be a source of constant anxiety. It becomes instead a tool, an instrument in the hands of someone finally awake. So now you've seen behind the curtain. The brutal truth about how millionaires think is not about luxury cars, private jets, or glittering status symbols. It's about perspective. It's about refusing to be lulled into illusions of fairness, rejecting the invisible scripts that keep most people small, and embracing the paradoxes that unlock real freedom. It's not about greed, it's about agency. Not about luck, it's about clarity. Machiavelli warned that those who cling to appearances are ruled by those who understand reality. And perhaps that is the simplest way to summarize this entire journey. The rich think differently because they dare to face life as it is, not as they wish it to be. That willingness to confront the brutal truth, to see the game without sentimentality, is what allows them to bend it in their favor. Now, the question falls back on you. Will you continue playing by the old rules, working harder, waiting for fairness, hoping for luck? Or will you begin to practice this new lens, questioning inherited beliefs, seeing risk as possibility, embracing paradox as strength, and reclaiming control over your decisions? The invitation here is not to worship money, but to master the mindset that frees you from fear. Because the real reward is not the million, it's the freedom of knowing you can shape your life, instead of being shaped by it. It's waking up each day with clarity, dignity, and the quiet confidence that you are steering your own ship. So let's make this personal. Think back to one of the impact phrases we shared earlier. Which one struck you hardest? Which one felt like it was written for your life? Maybe it was comfort zones or poverty zones. Maybe it was fear of loss keeps more people poor than actual loss ever does. Whatever it was, I want you to hold it close, reflect on it, write it down, act on it this week in one small but concrete way, and then come back here. Share in the comments which insight shook you the most and how you plan to apply it. Because when you speak it out loud, you not only commit, it becomes real. If this video gave you a new lens, if it challenged you or stirred something inside, hit the like button, subscribe for more conversations like this, and join this community of people who are done with illusions and ready for clarity. Because the truth may be brutal, but it's also the first step to freedom.